first of all, thank you for coming on. Do you want to introduce yourself to everybody, and then we can get started on this chat?
For sure. Thank you for having me. So, my name is Aide Hernandez, and I am one of the co-founders of Academic Amigas on Instagram and on TikTok. We're only on two platforms right now. But I was born and raised here in Chicago. I've studied mostly in Chicago, and so I'm currently a PhD student in a sociology program. So, I hope to become a professor fairly soon.
Well, I mean, and you go to? Did you mention?
Um, yeah, for publication purposes, can we not say the institution?
Okay, sure. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, yeah, that's fine.
if we can cut it out for safety reasons.
For sure. Zach, when you edit this, my producer Zach, when you edit this, cut out the whole mention of our alma mater.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
but yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I had on Myra Gaona.
Yeah. Hmm.
She's a friend of I don't know if you know Priscilla, but she's a friend. She's in North Lake, and she's a friend
Hmm.
of my wife's family.
Nice.
And then I saw that she met up with you somewhere,
Hmm.
and just basically young Latinas, pursuing academic careers, PhD careers especially.
Hmm.
And to me that's very interesting, like because I'm always been interested in about how people, where people come from and how do they get from where they come from to where they're trying to go.
Hmm.
And as Latinos, Latinas, especially first generation, are you first generation?
Yes, I am.
So it's we don't come from a long line of Smiths,
Hmm.
or Johnsons. We come from people who, they get here and they don't know anything. They can't even help us with,
Exactly.
they teach us principles, they teach us hard work and perseverance, but they can't actually tell us how to climb that ladder, and
Hmm.
it's all on us. So it's like kind of like how they're immigrants coming to America, and then we're immigrants still, even if we're born here. Were you born here?
Yeah, I was born here.
So yeah, I mean, this is like a theme of first generation Americans on here. But yeah, I mean, so where you're in sociology, right? I mean, sociology to me is stats, and every time somebody says like, is sociology something like, oh, Latinos are 58% of Latinos do
Uh-huh.
this or blah blah blah. That's sociology, right?
So it's interesting that you say that the first thing that comes to mind when people say sociology is statistics, because entering my program, like you mentioned, we don't we don't know a lot of things going in, like into anything, like even elementary, middle, high school, or nonetheless college. And so I didn't even know I had to take statistics when I did my sociology program. But yeah, so sociology is a very big study on basically on people, on society, why things are the way that they are. And so I am specifically interested in Latino families. So just like you mentioned, right, we're first gen. So I'm really interested in the experiences of people growing up in the US, right? So how our family got here. So, what were the patterns of waves of immigration? Like, a lot of our families immigrated here for labor. And so, what was going on in the States? What drew them here? And then, basically, their children, how are their children navigating spaces and living basically in the diaspora with their families? So, like, we may ethnically identify as X, Y, and Z. What does that mean when we're surrounded with other people who are diverse culturally, ethnically? And specifically, I'm interested in the identity development, so of Indigenous and African Latinos. So what does it mean, one, to be, for example, Mexican? And then on top of that, what does it mean to be an Indigenous Mexican or an African Mexican? And so there's like multiple layers. And so I'm trying to get down to like the very specific one that goes a little bit broader than what it is to be Mexican, or what it means to be Puerto Rican or Colombian. So, like, unpacking those layers.
And you're Mexican American.
Yes.
What state is your family from? Do you know?
My mom is from Guerrero and my dad is from Hidalgo. So my parents met here in Chicago.
Oh wow. And yeah, it's interesting that that's such an interesting field of study because I was just thinking when you were explaining like what does it mean to be Mexican American or Mexican for example, right? And your parents come from Mexico and they have this idea of Mexicanness that's kind of was formed in Mexico, so they have like this very pure way of identifying as Mexican. And
Mhm,
then you can't be Mexican the way they are Mexican. You just can't, right? Because you're in America,
mhm,
where our identity is shaped by, like you said, the people around us,
mhm.
by their identities and by how they identify us, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's people who maybe are Latino, but they look completely white, and so they probably feel white, right?
Mhm,
Or Latinos who are Latino, but they look completely black, right? And they probably don't feel as Latino, whatever the hell that means. We know that that's problematic, right? As
yes.
Latino, everybody's as Latino, right?
Mhm,
Latino comes in all kinds of diversities, but it's like it's hard to. The whole point of that little rant was that like there's pressure on your from your parents, especially your immigrant parents, to be like
mhm.
my mom's Honduran, right? And there's not so much pressure there, but like there's pressure like to be Honduran in a certain way, to be Mexican in a certain way, and then you're as first generation American, we're like, no, I can't be that kind of Mexican. I can't be that kind of Honduran in America. I have
Mhm.
to kind of remix my identity. I mean, is that kind of what you're getting at? What have you found that people struggle with, or how do they cope?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly it, right? And so, like, the way that we look plays a big part in how we perceive ourselves
Yeah.
and how others perceive ourselves, right? And so, just like a really brief, like, over like background on my family. So my mom's side of the family takes on like really light skin. And my dad's side of the family is indigenous, right? And so what does that make me? How can I ethnically, culturally identify given that I am made up of everybody else who came before me, but I don't speak the indigenous language, right? And so when I go back to Mexico, like my family speaks their indigenous language. I don't know the language. My dad doesn't know because he was one of the youngest one, so only the older siblings were able to still learn the language, right? So like even given the example of my dad is like he doesn't know the language, but that's what he grew up with. And then now me living in the diaspora, like being first gen in the States, where does that place me? And so I think it's like a lifelong journey of like how you create your identity. Your identity is always changing. Like you said, like Latino or Latinidad being a problematic term, right? You know, we're constantly changing the ways that we identify ourselves. And so I am still in the initial stages of the research proposal. So I haven't gotten yet to the interviewing parts. But based on like literature and just things that I've been able to research is there's like a lot of confusion around just like identity development. So there is a really good identity scholar. His name is Urieta, and he does identity development on Mexican Americans. And so he describes it as like a painful journey, is like you're longing to understand who you are, who your family is. And given the fact that we've been technically displaced, right? Like our families have immigrated and they've
Right.
settled here now. It's like a sad reality, right? It's a sad reality to think about colonization, to think about genocide and other violent acts that our families have endured. And so there comes a lot of like generational trauma with that. And so first you have to sit with that, unpack that, and then sort of identify or develop an identity where you're comfortable, where you learn about your family. And so one aspect of the research that I'm really interested in is just talking to people about their conversations that they've had with their family. Like some people don't know when their family immigrated to the
Right.
US, why they did, who was the first person. And so I think on turning sort of for it to not be so academic, like research, I guess it's more like storytelling, right? So like what is your story, what have your parents or your grandparents told you, and how can you preserve those stories, because those are important. And given that sometimes we're far away from the people who know these stories, right? Or unfortunately some of our family members have passed, and so those stories are lost. And so I think that's sort of a motivation as to why I want to do this research is to one, preserve my stories and then also preserve the stories of other folks. And basically just hear their journeys on how they develop their identities.
And that's so important for people to like talk to their parents, especially Latinos, right? Especially first generation. Talk to your
Mhm.
parents, talk to your grandparents, because they have like knowledge, family knowledge of where
Mhm.
you come from. That when they're gone, that information's gone. You
Yeah.
know, like I'm estranged from my father's side, and that's my Puerto Rican side, and I have so many questions about that side, right? I know very little about it, and it's like, I guess when you're younger, you're like, oh, well, I just don't know. But the older you get, I'm 36, the older
Mhm.
you get, you start to be like, okay, yeah, where do I come from, right? Because you start to see that, and this is probably like a little bit of psychology or something, but you start to see that um, at the older you get, you start to see, oh man, all the stuff that happened to me as a kid is really like forming who I am. Like, no matter
Mhm.
how much I might hate my mom or hate my dad, I'm them. Like, I see them in me, right?
Yeah.
And so then you start to say, okay, well, where does our family come from? Because that must have to do with who I am, why I'm here, like why I'm
Mhm.
here. I think it's interesting that you said that you describe yourself as a Mexican American living in a Mexican diaspora. You hardly ever hear Mexicans talk about living in a diaspora, but diaspora means that you can't you're not in your homeland because your homeland is something's happened to your homeland that's made it impossible for you to live there, right? And you have to leave. And
Yeah.
most Mexicans don't talk like that, right? They're immigrants, but they're not immigrants. They're actually fleeing, right?
Mhm.
Violence, poverty, what NAFTA's done to Mexico, what America's done to Mexico for 150 years. I mean,
Mhm.
do you, what made you start talking like that you're living in the diaspora?
Yeah, that's a really good point because that's what the term is used for, right? It's usually to describe folks who identify as Black living or being displaced because you can't really pinpoint where you immigrated or where you came from, right? Where your ancestry is from. But that's exactly like you mentioned it, right? Mexicans, just as well as other immigrants, are fleeing poverty, and it's a humanitarian crisis. It's not, we've heard like countless stories, like people wouldn't risk their lives to come here if they had the opportunities, the resources in their home countries, right? Because nobody would want to leave their home, their whole family.
Right.
And so I mentioned I grew up in Chicago, and so I was heavily involved in a community organization here in Chicago since I was in high school. So since I was about 15 or 16, and I was heavily involved with After School Matters, which I'm not sure if it's like a Midwest initiative, but basically just youth programming, right?
Yeah, I think it was like the remember Mayor Daley? I think his wife started that.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Maggie
Um,
Daley, the park in Millennium Park is
oh,
named after her. She
yeah.
started that, I think.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so I was heavily involved in After School Matters. And so this youth programming really just opened my eyes and educated me in things that honestly I didn't learn in school. So I'm a product of public schools of CPS. And so this youth programming was like focused in my neighborhood. So I grew up in a low income neighborhood with mostly Mexican and Puerto Ricans. And
Tell us
so
what neighborhood?
I grew up in Logan Square.
Logan's. I'm from Logan Square, Sawyer and
Oh,
Cortland.
dope.
That's crazy. Small world.
So yeah, and so we can talk about how our neighborhood looks like now, but yeah, so before gentrification in the neighborhood, right, there wasn't a lot of resources, and so I would like to say that I've gotten to this point because of youth programming and being heavily involved in my community. And so in this programming, I learned what gentrification was. I learned about politics. I learned basically about immigration rights. So that's when I became an activist, right? And so part of this programming, then we created an initiative when the No DAPL was going on, so the North Dakota Access Pipeline, right? So we see nationwide that indigenous folks are being displaced and their land is being occupied because they want to build this pipeline, right? And so that was hitting national news or even globally, right? And so we were in youth programming and we were talking about this. And then we started talking about how we can see these nation issues like right in our neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously not the same, but we can see similarities as to displacement going on because of gentrification. So folks having to leave the neighborhood because they can't afford rent. There's not a lot of jobs available to immigrant families. So we can see a lot of similarities, right? And so we had the opportunity, one, to create a program to just focus on our family history, what it's like to be brown in Chicago.
Yeah.
And so it was like a year-long program, and we interviewed our family members. We did community exhibitions where we presented poems or visuals, just our stories of our families and what it means to be both indigenous and or African Latinos. So to be an indigenous Mexican, an Afro-Puerto Rican, an Afro-Colombian, because like I mentioned, right, we sort of just stop at the first hyphen, so like Mexican American,
Right.
but like going deeper into that, we see that our families have more richer backgrounds, right, than we've known. And that's also because, like as you mentioned, right, we don't sometimes talk to our family about this, and unfortunately sometimes our family has internalized racist ideologies of your family,
Right.
or your history. Like sometimes it's like, oh, we don't want to relate to our indigeneity because that's looked down upon, or we don't want to
Because
be in.
that's a new thing, right? That's for millennials, us young people, like being proud of being indigenous. I guess started in the '90s, right, with the 500-year anniversary of Columbus's landing. But like
Mhm.
for our parents and our great and our grandparents, being in calling somebody an Indian was a slur, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so
Because
exactly that.
I'm an indigenous European on my Honduran side, and
Mhm.
I'm black and European and Taino on my Puerto Rican side. So for me, yeah, I've always thought that the black white, black people and Latino people, that's a fallacy, right? There's black
Mhm.
Latinos. And
Yeah.
then, like, for me, being all those things, being trigueño, which is what we say in Spanish, right? Trigueño,
Mhm.
makes you see the fallacy of all those things, right? Of race in general. Because, like, if you ask me on any given day, do I feel white? Do I feel black? Do I feel indigenous? I feel all those things. And because I feel all of those things, I kind of don't feel any of them. I just feel
Mhm.
like a human being, you know?
Yeah, exactly that. And so sometimes it's just been internalized in our family history to not be in tune with our indigenous ancestry or being in tune with our African ancestry. And so, yeah, so basically my interest really just stemmed from that program, just wanting to learn about more stories. And like I mentioned, right, most importantly, learn about my story and my
Yeah.
family's history.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I studied history at our alma mater, and it came from me listening to stories that my grandma would tell of
Mhm.
Honduras, right? And then I got interested in Honduras. Like you get into like some. Do you find as a Latino Latina like that? I mean, some of us I feel like really ask like, why are we here? Like
Mhm.
how why was I born here? Especially when you're born to parents who weren't born here. Like what
Mhm.
happened? Why did you leave? um, some people, I guess, a lot of Latinos or a lot of people just live in the present and worry about the future.
Mhm.
My wife says I think about the past too much. You think about the past too much. You think about the past too much. But I feel like you have to really understand what happened to you, what happened to your family, to
Mhm.
understand your position in this society and understand how you're gonna navigate going forward, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like you mentioned, right? You are your parents, you are your
Right.
family. And I do definitely heavily believe in that. And so like as a woman of color, right? It's hard to navigate spaces sometimes. And I don't know if you've ever felt like this before, but like, you enter a room and you just kind of don't feel safe or you don't feel very welcomed.
With this
That's like,
with this skin color, I feel it all the time.
and I will acknowledge that I am a very light-skinned Mexican woman, right? And so like I heavily believe that that's just like our ancestors within us, like telling us, like, the vibes are here. The vibes here are a little off, right? And so it's important to understand your family history. One, to just cultivate an identity where you feel empowered, because to navigate these spaces that uphold white supremacy, like you really have to be confident and you have to own yourself. And so I think it's really important to learn about your history, learn about who you are, why you are sometimes the way you are, right? Because we've internalized bad traits as well.
Yeah.
We've internalized bad traits, but we also have internalized resistance. And so I think that is like a really important concept of like who you are, right? Is knowing who you are so you're confident and you can walk into any space and know, like, just own it.
Yeah. I'm sure you've read the book Brown in the Windy City.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a, like, I mean, isn't that the best? So that's a straight sociology book, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
probably the best Latino sociological book that there is.
Mm-hmm.
And as a Chicagoan, as a Latino in Chicago, we all know that it's changing now, like you mentioned. Puerto Ricans were in Humboldt Park, Logan Square. Mexicans were in La Villita and Pilsen. Black people were in West Side, South Side. And it's that book shows again, like, you have to ask, why are things the way they are now, right?
Mm-hmm.
People seem to believe that, like, the way things are now are the way things have always been, but that's so far from the truth. And when you read that story, I can't remember who wrote it. Professor, I think her name's Lydia something. I think she went to our alma mater too, or either that or DePaul.
Mm-hmm.
And she shows how, like, how black and Latino, black people, Puerto Ricans, and Mexicans. I'm not explaining to you. I'm explaining to people who don't know
No,
the book.
yeah.
Black and Puerto Ricans and Mexicans all used to live in, like, this little enclave in the near West Side, the near West Loop or whatever the fuck they call it, and how the city actually went in there and actually they blew up that neighborhood. They scattered it to
Mm-hmm.
build our campus of our alma mater.
Yeah.
And so I'm giving too much away, but but so again, yeah, like, I'm I guess that's the nerd in me, right? That's what makes you a nerd, right? That's what makes you want to get into, especially you. You're an academic, which is like the nerd of the nerds, right?
Yeah.
You have questions, right? That you're looking for the tools to be answered. Is that what drives you to go into academia?
Yeah, definitely. I have always just really enjoyed learning and being in school. Like you said, the nerds of the nerds, right? Like I just love
You
doing
sound
homework.
super nerdy. I loved being in school.
Yeah. But then just like entering like undergrad and just like learning that there's just like different possibilities of what you can do and what you can learn, right? So like when you're an undergrad, you take all these cool courses and you're like, wow, that's dope. And so my educational background was actually not in sociology. So I did undergrad and my master's in social work. And so that was very heavily based on practicing. And so when I was in undergrad and my master's program, I was really interested in the mental health aspects of Latino families, and I still definitely am. But I also wanted to do a little more than practicing. So that's what drove me to apply to PhD programs, is because I wanted to stay in this academic space and I wanted to continue learning and I wanted to teach. So that's what drove me to do a PhD. But definitely, these questions are just like lifelong questions. Like it's an ongoing journey to discover who you are,
Right.
make up an identity for yourself. And I think one thing that I haven't mentioned is also like the healing aspect of it. So like learning and unlearning some of the things that we've grown up with is also something that really motivates me into doing this.
Yeah, because if you don't, like, study where you come from and what people like you have gone through, right? you
Mhm.
tend to think like, oh my God, I'm having the worst experience. Like the whole world is caving in on me. And like you said, it could be
Mhm.
therapeutic to read about the history of your family, the history of your people, right? The history of Mexico, the history of other Mexican women, especially, right? Somebody who's like you, but other Mexicans, other women in general, right? Just people who, because I find that I read about history of all over the world, and just because I'm Puerto Rican Honduran doesn't mean that I don't read a story from India or
Mhm.
from the Middle East or somewhere or Europe even, right? Somebody who's completely unlike me, but their life is kind of like me, and it could help to you know I don't know. We tend to like kind of beat ourselves up too. I mean the world is rough, and the world is changing, so our parents really can't help us. Like what
Mhm.
I asked Myra this question, like when you go from undergrad into postgraduate, is there any resistance from your family? Like, yeah, it's great that you're going to school, but you need to go get a job. You need to go start your life. Like, don't go into. Was there any kind of hesitancy, or did they support you?
I would say that thankfully my parents were supportive after, telling them like I'm done with undergrad, but I'm going to keep going because I want to do this. And so they understand that like to become a professor, you sort of have to have a PhD, right?
Yeah.
But so thankfully my parents have been supportive. I would say on the other hand, sometimes it's me who is not very supportive, because they're like, as much as you try not to do this, but I feel like I still sometimes compare myself to other people, like other people my age,
You
right?
have to, right? It's kind of our culture.
Yeah, it's like X, Y, and Z. Like this person's doing this, they have a job, a house, a car, X, like a whole bunch of other things, right? And so I would say actually I'm the one that says that sometimes. So thankfully my parents support me, and my family is very understanding of my journey. Um, but yeah,
Most of the stress, most of the negative feelings that I have come from me comparing myself to other people. You know,
it's so hard not to.
I'll be feeling myself and I check Instagram, just, I'm feeling myself. I'm having a great day, very productive. And I see somebody who, uh, maybe got their doctorate. I have a friend who just got their doctorate, and like,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's amazing. Right. And then it's like almost like FOMO. Like you want to do what everybody else is achieving. Right. But you can't,
Hmm.
right? You have your one path. And the thing that helps me, and maybe hopefully it'll help other people, is that I always ask myself, like, whether they're a millionaire, whatever they're doing, right?
Hmm.
Would I switch places with them? Would I be them? Meaning
Hmm.
with everything that they have, like their wife, their friends, their job, everything. And it's always no, right? I like my life.
Yeah.
I like, with the good and the bad. Um, so when I was watching some of your videos, like past couple weeks, and like you talk about all the, which is great. You talk about all the things people tell you, right? When they
Hmm.
find out. One of them was like, "Oh, you don't look like a professor," right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
I love that. People think the way I look, they think I'm a douchebag. Maybe I am. I'm kind of right, but like they don't think I'm smart. They don't think I read. They don't
Yeah.
think I write. They don't think any of that
Uh-huh.
stuff, right? So isn't that kind of awesome though? Isn't it kind of awesome to be underestimated, right? And then you
Hmm.
open your mouth, and then you're intelligent, and then you're driven, and you're like, it's good to sneak under the radar, kind of.
Yeah, and honestly, so I think it's a really good point to look at it as to like what I switch positions with other people. Definitely not, right? And so it has taken some time for me to just realize that like I'm doing this because I love to do this. Like I want to do this and I want to become a professor because we need more women of color as professors, right? I
What's the
unfortunately,
percentage? Isn't it like 3 or 5% of professors are
uh,
Latino, right?
yeah, I had recently posted it was 4% are 4% of professors are Latinas. And the number of Latinas who get a PhD is like 1%. So it's very, very low, right? And so you can see the need for more inclusion of professors from diverse backgrounds. But yeah, I think it's also a great way of putting it that people underestimate you, and then you just pull up and you're like, hey, everything that you thought about me is actually wrong.
Right.
And a lot of people actually resonated with with that video, they said that people also said, well, you don't look like this, or I was expecting like a different version of you. And it's just like, well, that's just insecurities of other people that are being projected onto you.
What's called prejudice. You are prejudging somebody, right?
Yeah.
And
And somebody, oh, sorry, I'm sorry to
no,
cut
go
you off.
ahead, go ahead.
Somebody said something, I forgot what it was. Never mind. I forgot. It was something about like, oh, it was something like people are just hating because they wish they could do all these dope things that you're doing. Um, so yeah, I was like, thank you everybody for being so motivational.
No, it's true. I mean, people will tell you everything that it's like with Simone Biles, right?
Mm-hmm.
She pulls out of the all around final, and it's all these. I saw this tweet was like, all these grown ass men who can't do a
Mm-hmm.
cartwheel are telling Simone Biles what she should do, right? Like, it's people who aren't doing it themselves because they're afraid to or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they'll tell you like why you can't do it, right? You're this, you're that, blah blah blah. They're projecting, like you said, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, exactly. I love that they can't do a cartwheel.
no, yes. I mean, it's interesting that like people think that she has to like I said I said the other day, like, an athlete's body is their body, like that's her body, whatever she wants to do with her body.
Mm-hmm.
If she doesn't want to compete, fine. Like, she doesn't owe us anything, especially when we all know she's the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, people always want to tell you what it's control, right? People always want to tell you what they think you should do because they're not on their. If when you're on your shit, you're not doing that. You're not telling people what they need to do because you're too busy doing you, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that's also one of the things or one of the reasons why I really enjoy running Academic Amigas is because I'm just sharing what I've experienced. And it's so nice that people reach out and they say, like, hey, I really resonated with this. And like, you're really helping just combat a whole bunch of insecurities or just like normalizing these things, right? And so sometimes I'll post that like I don't feel good mentally, and so I'm not going to work. I'm not going to force it sometimes. And just when I posted that the next day, we see a lot of talk about athletes not competing because of their mental health, right? And so I think it's important to normalize like what goes on behind the scenes in anything. So like I'm doing behind the scenes on academia, and so I think it's these platforms, and so like that's how I met Mayra too, are really important. And it's so nice to have a community where other people are on similar journeys and just sharing resources and space with other people virtually.
The cool thing about like Latinas are killing it right now, and one because from what we always knew, Latinas always like even back in the day in the old machismo days where your mom was just the person running the house.
Mm-hmm.
Moms were badass, man. They had big ass families and they were running like basically a little company, right? Everything had to get done in the house, and the dad, all he had to do was go to work, right? Like actually running the house, especially in a Latino family is hectic, right?
Yeah.
And all these skills, but now Latinas in the 21st century are bringing all that energy and drive and focus and like you guys are killing it, especially academically. I think what is it? There's way more college graduate Latinas than there are Latino men
Mm-hmm.
graduating from college. And the other thing I wanted to say is that like it's also great, and I'm jealous about how Latinas support each other, especially I mean, specifically on social media, but just generally, like you guys are physically meeting up in a way that I wish Latino men would do. We're still in that we're still kind of immature. We're still, competing. That guy's success is I need to fucking downplay it. But you guys like boost each other. No matter what you guys are doing, you guys boost each other. And do you feel that you have this whole audience of Latinas, but Latinas especially, right? People like you who from all walks of life, but who are Latina, just supporting you and behind you, being like, "Go, girl," you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, it's honestly so it's so nice. Like sometimes you don't understand the impact of things that you do. And so sometimes I'll get messages of people saying like, hey, like your posts are really motivational, or I'm happy that you're normalizing taking breaks and just really taking care of yourself. And it's just so nice to have access to a platform where I can connect with other people. And so like I wouldn't have met Maida if it wasn't for Instagram, right? If we
Right.
weren't in the same community, I wouldn't have met up with her or other folks. So there's a lot of people who follow us like across the country. And so I've had the opportunity to connect with them virtually and just network. And so I think it's really special. And I really appreciate everybody who has reached out and everybody who's I guess also mentored me up to this point. And so I'm all about giving back. And so that's definitely one of the components in our mission is to just give back. Because like I've mentioned, I don't think I would have been here if it wasn't for other mentors, if it wasn't for people in my community just honestly believing in me.
I mean, was there like, and this is a running theme in the show too. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
always goes back to one that your parents kind of push you in a certain, they tell you something or they show you something when you're little that puts you on this path. But there's also teachers, one or two teachers in your life who
Yeah.
really encourage you. Did you have that?
I would say honestly, it's the people like my mentors from my youth programming. They were all women. My programming was mainly made up of women of color. And I think that really just motivated me. They are badass, independent women. They're just paving the way for like just going out of what is expected of women, of Latinas.
Right.
And so they're out here fighting for social justice, and I was like, this is hella dope. And I took an academic route, but I think I've always and will always be involved in my community in any way that I can. Definitely looks different now because of COVID. But before then, I was out protesting all the time. And then also being in graduate school, that looks a little bit different, given the time and the abilities that you can as a grad student.
But I mean, doing what you're doing is a form of activism, right? You are getting into a space that has been historically closed to people of color generally, but especially Latinas, right? And like you
Mm-hmm.
said, I mean, now when you become a professor, some young Latina's gonna see you, and you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be what is in their mind a professor, right? And that's
Yeah.
breaking all these stereotypes, that basically we think of professors as an old white man with glasses and a tweed
Yeah.
jacket and a pipe, right? That's just that's a subtle way of closing the door on the rest of us, right?
Yeah. And so like I am super blessed to have an advisor who's a Latina, and like I
Wow.
fangirl about her all the time because representation really does matter. Like I struggled so much transitioning into grad school because like grad school is very competitive. Like a PhD is super competitive because that's the ultimate thing that you could be in, right?
Right.
And so I'll be real, like I cried my first semester. Like I think it was day 4, I was already crying, like on the train. I was like, I can't do this. This is hard. Like other people know more than I do. And so like I would go to my advisor's office and I would literally have like literally the tears in my eyes and that feeling in your throat.
Yeah.
And she was like I didn't have to tell her anything because she knew. Like I'm sure she was in the exact same position when she was a grad student. And it's great to not have to over explain myself or justify my emotions because she's already experienced something similar than
Right.
than to these things, right? And so it definitely makes such a difference. And like you said, right, like hopefully I can also make that difference for somebody else sometime in the future.
It's so interesting that you said that you didn't have to explain, what you were going through because she's a Latina, right? Because
Mhm,
I know a Latina. Well, I know some Latinas who are seeing a psychiatrist or going to therapy. It's still
mhm,
not a thing with men. I know some Latino men who are doing it, but very few. But it's really, Latinos are really are really again at the forefront of breaking that stereotype in the Latino community of going to therapy. But she's complaining because she has a white woman therapist, right? And
mhm,
so as a first generation American, she is talking about these anxieties that, especially because she's a first citizen born in her family, right? Born
Yeah.
citizen by birth. So she's talking about all the pressures, and she's trying to maybe, and she's maybe she doesn't know how to explain it, right? Because she's still unpacking it.
Hmm.
But she tells me that she wants to get a Latina therapist because she senses that the white woman just doesn't understand, really what she's going through, and she feels like
Hmm.
she doesn't want to feel like she's exaggerating or she's crying to this white woman. But especially as a Latina, right? You don't want to feel like you're crying to some Karen, right?
Yeah.
So it's, and I felt like when I went to DePaul first for psychology,
Hmm.
and I felt like that. I mean, I wasn't doing a doctorate, but I'm the first person in my family to go to college, and unlike with you, I didn't have anybody, right? Everybody was white, and
Hmm.
and I didn't have any friends, or I didn't have anybody in this. So I ended up leaving and going to our alma mater, which I think is a really good place for first generation American Latinos, Northeastern too.
Hmm.
I find that a lot of Latinos go to those two schools because they have a really good support system, and they know their student body, right? That most of them are
Yeah.
Latinos, and that they don't know how to navigate these things, so they make it really easy.
Yeah, definitely. And so I think in college in general, right? In school, you're just always drawn to people who are you, who have a similar background
Right.
because it's that unspoken language. Like I don't have to explain these things to you. We can just have like an automatic connection. And that's really essential in my journey that I have other students who have experienced similar things than me and who understand what it's like to be first gen, who have to have immigrant parents, or to just navigate spaces for the first time and just like build a community and help one another.
What do you do to stay like happy?
That's a good question. Honestly, I would say is just two things. I think connecting with friends and checking in on one another and sort of like despegándome
Yeah.
from what is considered my job, right? Just connecting in different forms. But I think also one thing that I've also been practicing more is just connecting with myself. Is I've really just enjoyed a lot of alone time.
Yeah.
I think it's also because of the pandemic, right? You have to learn to be with yourself. And I came across this one post that said, you really have to care for yourself because you're going to be your only friend forever. Like
Your
your
best
family,
friend.
you're going to be your best friend forever. And so why wouldn't you want to be with yourself? And so that those two things are things that have really made me happy is connecting with friends, spending time with my family, distracting myself from what responsibilities I have for my job. And then also just connecting with myself is spending time with myself.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a problem. Like, a lot of people aren't friends with themselves. A lot of people don't like themselves, and so they ignore themselves, and they're always trying to hang out. We know people like that, always trying to hang out with friends, always trying to like, always looking out, never looking in, because from
Mm-hmm.
whatever trauma or whatever they have, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know themselves, and that's sad. Like, it's good to hear that during the pandemic you were able to be friends with yourself, but that must have meant that you were friends with yourself before, because we know of people during the pandemic who it destroyed them. Now they're alone by themselves, and they've been running from themselves their whole life.
Yeah, I mean it's a ongoing thing, right?
Yeah.
I think yeah, I think now like you've sort of been forced to be with yourself, and at first it was difficult for all of us to be accustomed to this new way of living. It's being at your house, being with your family, like literally 24/7. So I think at first it was really hard. Like I've always struggled with mental illness, and so I think this is definitely a something new for all of us. And so it wasn't easy at first, but I think with time, just accepting that, like you said, you're going to be your best friend forever, learning new hobbies. Like I learned how to sew,
Yeah.
which I think is something I wouldn't have tried if I literally was not placed in the situation that we've been placed into.
Yeah, I mean, I took the podcast was just audio before the pandemic, and I was like, oh, one day I want to do video. And then when everybody started, like even Jimmy Fallon was doing his show from his house, I was like, oh, I can do that. And so the
Yeah.
pandemic was like an opportunity to actually jump into something that to be real, I was afraid of doing because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to work video.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's crazy that you said that. I mean, I've had mental health issues too, and it's so odd, but it's now that I understand myself that
Hmm.
the most depressed I've ever been was that first year to Paul.
Yeah.
And when I moved into this really nice house in Vegas that I live in now, and those are the two moments you would think that I'm riding a wave, right? I should feel happy, and that was the moment. Those are the two moments where I was at my lowest inside.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think it's also because you're placed in situations where you really have to know yourself in order to make it, in order to succeed, right? And so like going
Yeah.
back to the concept of healing is you're switching sceneries, you're being placed in a new environment, and that can trigger a lot of things. And so you, I'm sure, have overcome a lot of things, right? You overcame your time at DePaul. And so I think really knowing yourself and your abilities and being confident is something that can definitely get you far and help you overcome those things.
Well, it's like you're saying, like I had to learn that, some of the, I grew up pretty poor, right? We
Hmm.
starved, I was homeless. But some of my happiest moments were during those times, right? And so
Hmm.
and then when I was at DePaul, now I'm living in this nice area, and I went through those depressive states. I had to realize, oh, it's not nothing outside is going to make me happy. I'm not going to achieve anything. I'm not going to get into this school. I'm not going to get into this neighborhood. I'm not going to get this. Nothing like that's going to make me happy.
Hmm.
I have to be my own best friend. I have to check in with myself and be confident in myself. The other thing, um, it goes back to competing, right? And this is
Hmm.
coming from immigrant families, right? That we have this strong
Hmm.
work ethic, right? Like you probably bust your ass more than you even think you can, right? You're like, I don't know how I'm doing this. I'm gonna drop dead of exhaustion. And even
Hmm.
then, like we know our parents worked their asses off, right?
Hmm.
And so what I struggle with, and my wife too, is like being productive. Like we work long hours. It's sometimes some days it's just like I eat lunch at my desk, I eat dinner at my desk, and then I go to sleep, and then I wake up and I do it all again, right? And it's like, you a part of you is like coming from that immigrant culture, like, oh, just go through it, just grind, be a machine, right? There's people hunched over in the fields, right? That could be me, right?
Hmm.
And am I going to say, oh, I'm tired? No.
Yeah.
Um, but you have to give yourself a break. You have to say, I've done enough. I've done
Hmm.
enough today. Like, because it's never enough. In my mind, I'm such a perfectionist. I'm so hard on myself that
Me
I
too.
will never do enough in a day. Never, ever, ever do enough. I'll always be behind. And that sucks. That keeps me from being truly satisfied. But
Hmm.
you kind of just have to pat yourself on the back and be like, relax, just relax. Yeah, you haven't done enough, but that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point because, like, going back to what we've been talking about, is like we're comparing ourselves, right? Whether good
Yeah.
or bad. Like, I could, my situation could be worse off, right? And so I think that's one of the things that we have to unlearn, that we've learned from our family, is that we deserve breaks. Like, our parents deserve breaks too. They don't
Yeah.
have to work these long, exhausting hours in really poor, impoverished conditions, right? Like they deserve breaks, we deserve breaks. And it's always hard to understand that because our parents, our family has worked so hard, and we're very privileged, right? I am very privileged to be working from home, to have graduated from college, to be
Right.
in this PhD program. And it's all about reflecting and understanding your situation. And so I think, yeah, we're really hard on ourselves sometimes, and we have to be nicer.
That's interesting that you said that because, like, comparison can breeds anxiety, but because we're comparing ourselves to people at the top.
Yeah.
But if you compare yourself to people back in Mexico or me, people back in Honduras, or or I think of the little boy that I was when I was a kid. Could
Hmm.
he imagine what I'm doing now? No, he wouldn't. And he'd be like, "Oh my God, that's so awesome! You're doing
Hmm.
stuff beyond my wildest dreams." And so that kind of really helps me be like, you know what, like you're not where you want to be. Don't worry, you're still working on it.
Yeah,
But what you've done so far is fucking amazing. You're awesome.
exactly. Being in tune with your inner child, I honestly love that. And to your comment, el trabajo nunca se acaba. So you still have time to do whatever you want to do. And it's okay to understand that your work is always going to be there. And so not to beat yourself up for not doing what we have initially set our goals to be, right? That's something that I still struggle with is like, I have this awesome list that I want to do, and then it just hits me that I have really bad anxiety that day, right? And I just mentally and physically cannot do it.
Right.
And so what I have to tell myself is like, today is just not your day. That's cool. Just chill out. Tomorrow is going to be a new day. And then just start off with a more open mindset the next day.
And since we like, I don't know what kind of jobs your parents did, but like, you know, I have an intellectual career, right? I use my brain more than
Mhm.
my body, right?
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to realize that when my brain gets tired, I can't do anything physically. Like I would be like, keep going, keep going. Like what's wrong? Like I haven't done any. I've
Mhm.
just been at my desk all day. Why can't I keep going? But physical mental exhaustion is even more debilitating, I think, than physical exhaustion. Because if your mind can keep going, then you're going to force your body. But if your
Yeah.
mind can't keep going, then you're done.
Exactly. Definitely. Yeah. And also to remind ourselves that we're working and we're living in a pandemic, like our
Yeah.
lives drastically changed overnight. And so the our productivity is never going to be the same because we're in the circumstances that we are in now.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was awesome speaking to you. Let everybody know where they can find your guys' work and your videos and stuff like that. It's interesting that you guys are on TikTok and Instagram. I feel like those are the most dominant. Twitter's too political and it's for crazy political people, right? And Facebook is for like grandmas, right? um,
Mhm.
Instagram and Twitter and TikTok is really our generation's two go tos, right?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at academic_amigas. And there you can find just our experiences and in our PhD programs, and then just what has motivated us and how we're helping other folks.
And there's like two other Latinas primarily that you work with, right? One's getting a PhD in psychology, I think.
Yeah, so we're the three of us are PhD students. So it's Mari and Anna. So Mari is in an educational policy program, and then Anna is also in a sociology program. And so we met in college, and so I actually live with Mari. And yeah, we're just sharing what it's like to be in a PhD program as Latinas.
That's badass. I mean, and you're definitely inspiring people, and you gotta be. I'm sure of it. You are. There's probably some young Latina who is like debating, should I go get my PhD? And just like you said, seeing somebody else do it, right, and watching their journey makes it that much easier for you. You were surrounded by strong Latinas, right? And I gotta think that network, like you are the product of that network, all those strong women.
Yeah, definitely. It is possible. And there are people out there who want to see you win and who will help you.
Well, thank you so much. Have a good weekend and keep up the good work. We're all rooting for you.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Cheers.